Hey y'all, this is Chris Hicks and welcome to the Southern Rock Insider. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe and click the notification bell. It's time to rock Southern style.
The Southern Rock Insider.
Scooter Herring, let's talk about him for a second.
Scooter Herring was a local guy that I heard about. He'd been hanging around with Gregg down at the Sunshine Tavern here in Macon, which was a place where all the biker boys and the roadies went. And I kept hearing this guy Scooter was probably not good to be around Gregg. And then the roadies come to me and said, you know, he's really trying to watch out for Gregg. He does give Gregg drugs, but he tries to keep him away from the really poisonous stuff, and he's trying to, he's really not a bad guy. He's trying to help. So I called him in. Everybody was telling me, you should hire this guy, and he can be Gregg's assistant. And of course, we had Chank Middleton, who's Gregg's lifelong friend and still is around. But Scooter was brought in, and I told him afterwards, I said, when I called you in, I was either going to hire you or have you hit.
Wasn't sure yet, huh?
But I decided to hire you. And I don't regret it. Scooter had his ups and downs and surely had his weaknesses and was a BS artist extraordinaire. But he was a good, loyal soldier, and he saved Gregg's life a couple of times, and if he only did that once, would have been worth it. But I don't have any regrets. Later on, it got kind of nasty because he was kind of the fall guy in a drug trial, which the whole thing was political, and they were after other people.
A lot of bad press, all you guys about that trial and all that.
Yeah, and Gregg, the band was pissed at him at the time, but when the federal government puts you in a position like that, you can't beat them.
Right.
You can't beat them. And, he had to, but it came out, in the long run all right. Scooter did some time federal, but he came back. He worked with me with Sea Level, which was Chuck, Lamar and Chamo's band after the brothers broke up. He was around. He's passed away just a few years back now, but I have no regrets about working with Scooter. And there's a long chapter in the book about that whole trial and incident.
Again, about the bad press, a lot of stuff was in the media at that time about the drug trial and all that. I think a lot of people might have come to their own conclusions about what happened, but a lot of bad press is what we'll put that. Overriding a lot of good things that you guys were still doing, including spreading the music and carrying on after such tragedy and all. So people seem to overlook that sometimes. But you mentioned Sea Level, so let's move into that. Sea Level's starting to emerge. Out of the cracks comes the light.
Yeah. Well, when I was talking about the period when there was not so much camaraderie with the band, like there wouldn't even be sound checks most of the time. Well, Chuck, Lamar, and J-Mo would go to the gig every day about 4 o'clock, and the band wouldn't show to sound check with the rest of the band. So they started jamming around, having a little band of their own there at the gig, and they called it We Three to start with. And when the brothers broke up the first time in the summer of '76, they were ready to go, and they said, Willie, will you be our personal manager? And I said, yeah. And we had a good run. They were in a band too that was disco era, and man, the music business was really in a turmoil, and Southern rock was kind of poison at that time. But they weren't Southern rock. They were, I used to call them Southern Steely Dan kind of, it was jazz fusion. It was, and later Randall Bramlett came in, and Davis Causey, and they were a great band, and they were unfortunate to come around at that particular time in the music business.
We found a real recording of commercial for the Sea Level album coming out, and I thought it was well done because it's talking about a breath of fresh air. This album is for the music at the time. You got to remember Saturday Night Fever's topping the charts and all that. So strange times when it come out, but a breath of fresh air is a good way to put the Sea Level. And the Randall Bramlett and Davis Cause, what a great addition to already a great band. Randall's songwriting, That's Your Secret and some of that stuff. Really great material.
Well, one of the things the band asked me to do, said, now, I know Capricorn's going to give us an offer, but he said, you as our manager, I want you to go out and look for other deals. And I did. I went to Arista and talked to some other labels, and Dick Woolley, a Capricorn promo man, had started a label up. But at the end, Phil just told me, he said, write your own contract, write what you want, so we'll give it to you. And we had a good contract, and we did cut some great albums down here. And like I said, they sold well, the band did well on the road, but they never really broke through to like a super group.
So let me ask you there, Chuck Leavell. I remember in recordings, Gregg would introduce him as the Boy Wonder, Chuck Level. And then Sea Level comes, and I hear it's road case, Chuck Leavell. Is there a story behind that at all?
Well, it was, there were two ways to pronounce his name. Some people call him Chuck Level, some people call him Chuck Leavell. And when we came up with the Sea Level name, we didn't want to say Sea Leavell, so we just said, so Sea Level, that made sense. And Twigs, who had made this fantastic road case for his Steinway piano, Chuck Steinway. It had auto shock absorbers in it and everything, just so
I remember seeing that in the back warehouse years ago back here. Big crane-looking thing. Carrying a piano around.
It had, I think Twigs wrote on there, Sea Level Sound Company or Sea Level Piano Company.
That wasn't ever dubbed as a super group, but Sea Level kind of was an early super group if you think about it. Being the Brothers members there, Jimmy Knowles.
We played a lot of good shows. We played with we opened for Starship on a big long tour. We had some good dates. At the end, it just that we just weren't able to put it all the way over the top, and different people had different other ideas about music, so they went their ways. And then Chuck, of course, hooked up with the Rolling Stones.
Right.
That was pretty good.
So as we're rolling down through the 70s here, we're getting to around 78, 79. When we come to the Enlightened Rogues period of the Allman Brothers getting back together and recording again. And so bring us up to date on that.
Well, I was managing Sea Level at the time. Like I said, it was originally Chuck, Lamar, J-Mo, and Jimmy Knowles, guitar player. And then later on, we had Randall Bramlett and Davis Causey come in. We were, like I said, we were doing well, and the brothers had finally settled all their differences and decided they want to try it again, and got back together for Capricorn. We had I think it was at the Capricorn Summer Picnic they used to have every year up at Lake Sinclair, and they were, Chuck, Lamar, and J-Mo were formally invited to be in the Allman Brothers band, but the condition was they had to give up Sea Level, that it had to be 100%. And they just said, they weren't ready to do that at that time, so they weren't a part of that reunion. There was no hard feelings, but it just wasn't something that they were willing to do, to give up the Sea Level band. Which kind of tells you how well Sea Level was doing at that time. Plus, I don't know if they felt like they didn't want to go down a road they'd already been down before, but whatever. That didn't happen. But we were on the same label, and of course we kept up with what they were doing. And but the brothers reunion lasted a couple of years. 79, 80, 81, 80. By 82, they were at it. They had gone. Capricorn had gone out of business, and the brothers had moved to Arista Records. And it's a whole other question about Capricorn going out of business, but just quickly it was they just got caught in the marketplace. Like I said, it was a different time, and disco was all over the place, and Southern rock was the kiss of death, and they had borrowed a lot of money from the record distributors, and they just got in a financial spot where they just couldn't go forward. But the brothers had not broken up at that time. They went with Arista Records, and Clive Davis wanted to make them a singles band, and you can figure out where that was going. They had one pretty good pop single called "Straight from the Heart" that I remember, but Gregg hated it. But it was a good commercial record. But that wasn't going to last, and they broke up again. So that's when I got a call from Gregg. I was in between gigs and just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to get out of the music business. And I was up in Atlanta looking at some situations, and I got a call from Gregg just out of the blue. He said, "Hey, you want to come back to work for me? I got this solo band I'm doing." And Alex Hodges, who had been the band's booking agent for years, he had a management company called Strike Force up in Atlanta. Ended up managing Stevie Ray Vaughan as well and some others. But they called me in, and Alex gave me a share of the management, and then I went back on the road. And people were telling me again, the first time around they said, "What are you doing?" This time around they said, "You're too old to go back out on the road." And I said, "Hell no, I'm going." And but I had two hats then. I was a road manager and co-personal manager. But Gregg was going through some terrible times then. His finances were just awful. He was in tax trouble, and we were just trying to slowly get him out of the hole he was in. And we eventually did. We went to every label in the country trying to get Gregg. We went to Motown. We went everywhere. And nobody just really wanted to take a chance on Gregg. He had demos. He was singing better than he'd ever sung before in his life. But he just had the two breakups with the ABB and his personal life. And people just didn't want to take a chance on him. Well, Alex Hodges got a demo sent to him. And it was a song called "I'm No Angel," and he and I listened to it and said, "Man, that sounds like something Gregg wrote about himself." It was almost like an autobiographical song. It was written by a guy from England, but we started taking that record around, and then Epic Records said they had tested it with a radio guy, and he said, "I can get this song on like 250 radio stations." So they said, "We're going to make you an offer," and that's when we went with Epic Records with the "I'm No Angel" album. And
he got some radio play. I remember that.
Yeah, plenty. We got it with the top album-oriented song for the 2 or 3 tracks. Number 9 video for the year on MTV, which was hot then.
I remember that kind of turned the tides again for Southern music. It started again right there. It seemed like.
And of course, we were built in to open a lot of shows with Stevie Ray Vaughan, and that was a big package. That put Gregg in front of a lot of people. And then we started thinking, well, it's getting close to 20 years. Time to get a little reunion going here. And so Epic signed Dickey with the hopes that, a reunion would come about. And they would do a reunion. They would never publicize it, or it would never be like, the Allman Brothers bands getting back together, but they played Charlie Daniels used to have a volunteer jam. They played that. They played a benefit for Bill Graham in New York. And, there was the seed was there. And in summer of '88, as it came up on the 20th anniversary, it was Gregg had a second album on Epic, which just before the Bullets Fly, which did real well. But they wanted to get back together and do that album and go out on tour. So we did a 20th anniversary tour in '89, and they went on, played for another 20 years. Yeah, till 2014, I guess, was the last show.
Butch Trucks.
Butch Trucks, a nice Southern Baptist boy from Jacksonville. He was going to Florida State, playing in the school symphony, but he was part of that Florida. You know, there were a lot of bands back then that on what they call the Southern Circuit. The Hourglass was Gregg and Dwayne. Butch Trucks was in a band. Dickey was in another band. They were just, you know, but they would cross paths, and they eventually would do that famous Jacksonville Jam, which was the beginning of the Allman Brothers. But Butch was, you know, probably, that was the whole thing about that band. You look at them individually and they say, how in the hell can these guys get together? I mean, you got J-Mo, a black guy from Mississippi with an R&B background and jazz. You got Dickey Betts, who's just a rip snorting kind of a country player. You got Gregg, which is blue-eyed soul, and Dwayne, which is God knows what Dwayne was. You know, he was a spaceman, the sky dog. And Butch was, you know, his family probably said to him what my family said to me: "You're gonna do what?
You're gonna do what? Don't do it, Willie."
But that was just, you know, the stars and the moon and everything just lined up perfectly for those guys.
The right ingredients for that band
just came together.
What a combo! And it included J-Mo. We just mentioned him. But
J-Mo, Johnny Lee Johnson from Mississippi City, Mississippi. Now he had come up and been played for a lot of soul bands here. Phil Walden, before he had Capricorn, had one of the biggest R&B booking agents in the country. Of course, he had Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, and every name, Arthur Conley, Percy Sledge, yeah, every name you ever heard of in the black music business. And J-Mo had played for a lot of those bands, and there's some pictures of him with Otis. But he had Phil Walden, when Phil had first heard about this guitar sensation up at Muscle Shoals recording studio doing session work, he sent J-Mo and Twigs up there to just kind of check it out. And I guess J-Mo was thinking about going to New York and play jazz, but he I don't think J-Mo ever played on a session up at Muscle Shoals, but he and Dwayne hit it off, and when Dwayne decided to put a band together, J-Mo was in it. So
I like what J-Mo says about being in Muscle Shoals. I knew whatever I was going to do, I was going to do it with that guy. I was going to do whatever he did.
Yeah. Well, I think people said, man, you go with them white boys, you make some money. And that's how he came in. What a prince he is, God. What a great guy.
You know. How about Dickey Betts? Let's don't forget him.
Dickey Betts. How could you forget Dickey Betts? Dickey was a strange kind of guy. When I say strange, I don't mean strange. He was a different guy. He was a Southern guy, Southern roots. He had a lot of country influences from his guitar playing, but he also liked Django Reinhardt, who was, you know, completely not Southern,
right,
or not country. He had a lot of influences. Something I don't think anybody ever knew much about. He told me one time when he was working in the carnival as a carnival band, he was with Lash LaRue. If anybody's ever heard of an old cowboy star named Lash LaRue, Dickey Betts backed Lash LaRue up in the carnival. But Dickey was moody. You know, he could get frustrated and he could get angry, and but he could be completely mellow. And I think, you know, nobody ever told him he was a second lead guitar player, and the band certainly didn't consider him that way. But I think maybe at some point he might have felt like he was in the shadows, but it never affected his play. And of course, after Dwayne passed, he stepped up, and you know, But
To be handpicked by Dwayne to be the other guitar player is saying a lot right there. One question about Dickey, we got to be kind of friends through the years. I used to play with him a lot. And you hear rock and roll stories about Ronnie Van Zant and all this stuff. And how come Dickey the badass never got out to the public? He's kind of a badass, really, Dickey Betts. He can, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. But he's kind of a throw down kind of guy.
He is, and he's had his share of melees. And I think he punched a cop somewhere along the way. I know he redecorated some hotel rooms,
right.
And I know somebody that dodged a TV set that came out of one of his hotel rooms.
There's stories of Red Lamp Lounge going laying a $100 bill down. Anybody can whip my ass can have it. I mean, that's pretty badass, really. And
one time this was on his solo tour. It was like the first or second date, and he was really frustrated. I think he was feeling like, that he got some hand-me-downs, and he wasn't getting the attention that Gregg was getting on his solo tour. A lot of the guys wanted to play with Gregg instead of Dickey, but that's why the company kind of sent me out there to say, we'll get somebody else to work.
Right.
Take care of Gregg, you take care of Dickey. Well, one of the first nights, and I'm sure he won't mind me telling this, but he just was fired up and crazed. I think it was in Charlotte. It was somewhere in North Carolina. And back then, the Holiday Inns had these old English bars with the big oak doors and big brass handles. And anyway, the bar's closed and he was locked out and he wanted to get back in. So they called me and said, he's down here in the hall, redecorating the hall. So I went down there, and me, who probably weighed 135 pounds and never won a fight in my life, I get Dickey in a headlock. And I'm saying, what in the hell am I going to do? Because he could have cleaned me out. But another road crew came down. We finally got him calmed down. But his head was pressed against my jaw. And I was afraid to hold him and afraid to turn him. But it knocked one of my teeth out. And I said, well, this is going to be an interesting tour. Whew. But I love Dickey, and I saw him just briefly when he was up here for Gregg's funeral. And I'm sorry his health is not at the best right now, but like I said, there's two of us from the back cover and two of them from the front cover still kicking.
A little interesting note here too was talking about Dickey. Dwayne Betts, I want to mention him and how good he sounds these days. I know they're coming to town here in a few days, but Dwayne Betts and Devin Allman with the Allman Betts Band.
And Oakley,
that's right.
Oakley is in it.
Amazing how much Dwayne looks like his dad.
He does. He's a nice young man.
He sure is. He's a great player too. He really is. We're talking about the brothers and all this stuff and how things came to be and all other. What kind of finagling do you reckon Phil Walden did to get Phil Maurice pushed through and for that to come out, debut at #1 like that? Was that something he did or negotiated or
he and his partner Frank Fenner, who was a music publishing guy from England, actually South Africa, but he came here from England. Had been with Atlantic Records, and he was really good in the publishing end of the business, and but he and Phil were solid business partners, and they had this vision of a double album at a single album price, and the band playing songs, that were just long, and the people at Atlantic Records who, like I said, the first two albums hadn't done that well. They were okay, but they sold probably less than 100,000, maybe Out Wild South, the second one sold 135,000. But I remember they had a thermometer in the Walden office there. It was sales chart for the Allman Brothers band record, and so it was this thermometer. It was supposed to go up and up and up, and so the little red mercury was down there at the bottom, and it never really got that far up. But Phil and Frank just insisted that was the way to go with it, and Atlantic was saying, look, they hadn't even sold any records as solo. Now you want to do this massive live project in New York, where the union's prices and the recording, everything was expensive, and then you want to make it a double album, and then on top of that you want to sell it at a single price. I said, you know, ain't no way, but there was a way, and Phil insisted on it, and that was the key to it all. So
I don't know there's ever been another band that is in that situation of without a live album like that, you might not really understand the band. I don't know if there's ever been a better case of that. And I guess they knew that, or believed in it enough to where they saw it through, but it was definitely the right decision.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people that have not spoken well about Phil over the years, but he had the vision. I know for a fact that he had $200,000 out of his own pocket invested in that band before he ever made a nickel back. They had great recording contracts. They didn't pay for any studio time. They, you know, there just wouldn't have been an Allman Brothers band without Phil Walden. Now, he was a tough businessman, and he didn't give anything away, but he loved him like I loved him, and like anybody that ever worked with him loved him.
I saw an interview with Phil where he's talking about right before Phil Maurice. He said, "I'm beginning to wonder, maybe people ain't gonna get the Allman Brothers like I do. You know, maybe it's not gonna translate." But thank God it did, and everybody stayed with the project until it did. You know, sometimes that's what you got to do. So we've talked about the past, and let's talk about present day and on into the future. What that holds for Willie Perkins and Chris Hicks and all of us. What do you say?
Well, I say it's a good time to be alive, and I've got some great memories. I wouldn't go back and change anything from when I made that decision to go with those guys. Like I said, there was ups and downs and triumphs and tragedies, but I made friends for life, and the music's gonna outlive us all. It was a great time to be involved, and as time went on, and I had retired from the music business, people kept saying, "Man, Willie, you ought to write it down. You ought to write some of that stuff down." And I got to thinking, and I said, "Yeah, you know, some things are starting to get a little hazy in my memory, but I had a pretty good memory, and I had some good financial records that I could refer to." So I originally wrote the first book, No Saints, No Saviors, and it's been in print for many years. I did a second book called Allman Brothers Band Classic Memorabilia, which is more, it's got text, but it's more of a coffee table book. It's got all their t-shirts and posters and tickets and equipment, and you know, it's lavishly illustrated color. It's a beautiful book. It's done well. And I did a third book, which I'm finishing now. I don't know exactly when it'll be out, probably in 2022. But it's more of a diary. It's like you were talking about today in the Allman Brothers. It's going to be something like that. It's going to be where I was on a specific day, what we were doing, what town we were in, who we played with, what happened that day that I can tell about.
Well, see, for my money, Willie Perkins, that would be the one to go to. Your memories, everybody remembers things different, and there's quite a few people that have books out now, but I would think that your memories and your looking back at your notes would be probably the straightest version of what really happened. Now, that's my opinion, but I think that might be the straightest slant of it all.
Yeah, well, both the first two books are in print now, and people can get them on Amazon. They can get them at Barnes & Noble. If they live in Macon, they can get them at the Big House Museum. And if they want a signed, inscribed copy personally, they can hook up with me on Facebook. Just send me a message, William Perkins on Facebook, and I'll get you a signed book out.
Well, Willie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I want to say to you, on behalf of myself and all the people that love the music, thank you for your service in the Allman Brothers Band, and thank you for being there in those times and helping make this reality for us all. And I think you should be commended for that, man. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Chris Hicks for the Southern Rock Insider. Peace out. Hi, Chris Hicks here from the Southern Rock Insider. I'd like for you to hit this button right here and subscribe to our channel for all the latest updates and content.
The Southern Rock Insider.